There comes a moment in every life when the familiar order begins to fracture. It often arrives quietly, like the stillness before a storm. One day, you wake, look into the mirror, and the reflection staring back feels like a stranger. The achievements once polished with pride, the symbols of success you worked tirelessly to obtain, career titles, material possessions, social recognition, suddenly carry little weight. A hollowness opens beneath the surface, and in that empty space, a voice begins to stir. It does not shout, it whispers. It does not command, it calls. This is what Carl Jung described as the soul's summons, the beginning of individuation. For many, this awakening coincides with what is often called a midlife crisis. Yet Jung would insist it is no crisis at all, but rather an invitation. In the middle years, the structures of personality built so carefully to please society or to satisfy ambition begin to crumble. A successful business leader might feel inexplicably restless. A parent who has devoted decades to raising children might wonder who they are beyond the roles they have played. Someone who has climbed the mountain of recognition may discover the summit feels strangely barren. Jung observed that when these moments strike, they are not evidence of failure, but signs that the deeper layers of the psyche are knocking at the door, insisting on being heard. Imagine a man named David. For decades, David has defined himself by his achievements in business. He wore confidence like armor, believing his worth was measured by his income and his ability to control outcomes. Yet one evening, sitting alone after a corporate celebration, he feels an unshakable emptiness. Everyone congratulated him on his triumphs, yet within, a voice whispered, "Is this all there is?" David could not silence the unease. He had reached the pinnacle of his goals, only to find that the summit offered no true nourishment. It is precisely in such moments, Jung taught, that the individuation journey begins. Individuation is not about external victory. It is the quest to become whole, to harmonize the conscious mind with the vast unknown regions of the unconscious. Jung saw this process as the ultimate task of human life. The outward struggles, the ambition, the pursuit of security, the social masks, these belong to the first half of life. But the second half demands something different. It calls us inward. Jung compared it to hearing the voice of the soul rising above the noise of the world, urging us to walk a path we did not design, but which belongs to us alone. Picture standing before a forest at twilight. Behind you lies the well-lit road of certainty, the career ladder, the social expectations, the daily routines. Ahead of you, however, is a dim path winding into shadows. At its entrance glows a faint doorway of light. You feel both fear and compulsion, for you know crossing that threshold will change everything. This is the moment of individuation's beginning, the willingness to step into the unknown. Jung did not soften this truth. He warned that the journey is demanding, filled with confrontation, and sometimes painful. Yet he also believed it is the only path that leads to the self, the radiant center of wholeness hidden within. This voice, which Jung described as the whisper of the self, cannot be ignored forever. Many resist it, doubling down on ambition or distraction. Some drown it out with constant work, consumption, or fleeting pleasures. But for those who pause long enough to listen, the voice reveals itself not as a burden, but as a guide. It says, "There is more to you than the persona you show the world. There are rooms in your soul you have never entered. There are truths within you waiting to be lived." Perhaps you too have felt such a moment. Perhaps late at night, when distractions fade, you sense the faint tug of something beyond daily obligations. If so, you are not alone. Jung assured us that these stirrings are universal, They may arrive through crisis, through the loss of what once defined us, or simply through the slow dawning of a question. Who am I, really? This is why Jung called individuation the heroic journey of the inner world. Like the heroes of myth, each of us is summoned by an unseen force. Yet unlike myths of conquest, the dragon we must face lives within, and the treasure we seek is not gold, but authenticity. Individuation requires courage not to conquer others, but to confront ourselves. And so, the journey begins with the soul's call. It is not dramatic fireworks, but the quiet cracking of the outer shell, the moment when life as we have known it no longer satisfies. It is both unsettling and liberating. For in this breaking open, something greater waits to be born. If you are listening now, perhaps you have felt such a summons. Perhaps you sense, as Jung did, that success without meaning is an empty shell. Let this awareness be a sign not of despair, but of possibility. For what crumbles is only the false structure. What remains is the seed of wholeness waiting to grow. And just as David discovered, standing in the quiet after his triumph, the moment of emptiness was not his ending. It was his beginning. This first step is only the threshold. For the soul's call leads us inevitably to the first gate on Jung's path, the persona. That mask we wear for the world must be faced, questioned, and if we dare, set aside. The first threshold on this inward path is the persona, the mask each of us wears to meet the world. We craft it from early childhood, often without knowing, because we learn that certain parts of ourselves are welcome and others are not. A child who laughs loudly may be praised for joy, but scolded for anger. A teenager may hide sensitivity to appear strong. An adult may bury doubt beneath a polished smile. The persona is the sum of these masks, the role we play to gain acceptance and survive the demands of society. Jung described the persona as both necessary and dangerous. Necessary, because without it, we could not function in the world. We must adapt, communicate, belong. But dangerous, because if we mistake the mask for our true identity, we lose touch with the deeper layers of our being. To believe that the persona is the whole self is to live as an actor who never removes their costume. Consider a woman named Anna. In her career, Anna is admired for her poise, her eloquence, her ability to handle any crisis with calm precision. To her colleagues, she appears unshakable. Yet at night, when alone, Anna feels brittle, exhausted from holding the mask in place. She yearns to cry, to admit she is afraid, to reveal weakness. But the persona she has built, the competent professional, allows no cracks. Slowly, she forgets that vulnerability is part of her humanity. She believes she is only the mask. Jung would say Anna has fused with her persona, mistaking the mask for the self. This trap is common. Many men and women pour their entire identity into being the role they play. The provider, the caregiver, the achiever, the agreeable friend. They become so entangled in the persona that when life shifts, when retirement comes, when children leave, when success fades, they feel hollow. It is not because they have failed, but because the mask can no longer hide the truth. The self longs to emerge. Facing the persona requires courage. It is like standing before a massive stone mask, carved larger than life, and asking, "Who am I when I set this down?" Jung encouraged people to look at the roles they play and to ask if they still serve the soul's growth. Some masks may remain useful, others must be broken. The process often begins in small cracks. Anna, for instance, begins to allow herself to cry in the company of a trusted friend. At first, she feels shame, as though she has betrayed the mask. But then she senses a strange relief, as though breathing deeply for the first time. The persona resists exposure, but when light enters, the self stirs. Jung warned that to dismantle the persona can feel like death, because we fear losing the identity that others know. Society may resist as well, preferring the comfort of our familiar masks. Yet individuation demands this confrontation. For only by loosening the grip of the persona can we encounter the deeper truths waiting beneath. Picture again the forest path of individuation. The first gate appears as a colossal mask suspended in the air. Its eyes are hollow, its mouth unmoving, and its presence commands awe. The traveler pauses, trembling, for they realize they must step beyond the mask. Behind it lies the unknown. To remain clinging to the persona is to live safely but shallowly. To pass through it is to risk authenticity. This confrontation does not mean discarding the persona entirely. Jung emphasized that we still need it to navigate social life, but it must no longer rule us. It must become a tool, not a prison. When we face the persona consciously, we learn when to wear the mask and when to set it aside. We reclaim the freedom to be whole. Perhaps you sense your own mask now. Perhaps you feel the weight of pretending, the exhaustion of upholding an image. If so, remember, the mask is not you. It is only a doorway. On the other side lies the shadow, the parts of you denied, hidden, or disowned. Jung taught that beyond the persona, we must venture into that darkness if we truly wish to know ourselves. And so the traveler, having faced the mask, takes the next step. The forest grows darker. The path descends. The light of the persona fades behind, and before them opens the realm Jung called the shadow. Beyond the mask lies the territory Jung called the shadow. If the persona is what we allow the world to see, the shadow is what we exile. Anger, envy, desire, fear, impulses that do not fit the image we want to maintain. To step into this darkness is unsettling, for it means turning toward the parts of ourselves we have tried hardest to ignore. Yet Jung insisted that individuation requires nothing less. The shadow is not our enemy. It is our forgotten twin, carrying the very energies that, if integrated, can restore our wholeness. Think of Michael, a gentle man who prides himself on being kind and agreeable. He rarely raises his voice, never argues, always says yes to requests. His friends call him dependable, yet inside resentment grows. He feels exploited, but he cannot admit anger even to himself. When someone else lashes out in fury, Michael recoils with judgment. They are out of control. Jung would say this judgment reveals projection. The anger Michael despises in others is the same anger he has buried within. The shadow follows him, unseen but powerful. To enter the shadow is to walk into the labyrinth of our hidden selves. Jung likened it to descending into a cave where the air is heavy, the walls damp, and the light scarce. At first, shapes seem monstrous. A figure with blazing eyes emerges, our rage. A whisper in the dark echoes, our jealousy. We flinch because we have labeled these traits evil. But as eyes adjust, we see more clearly. The monsters are parts of ourselves, neglected and misunderstood. The shadow may be frightening, but it also holds vitality, creativity, and authenticity. Consider the artist who censors his wild impulses to appear respectable. His shadow may erupt in sudden destructive behavior or deep depression. But if he dares to enter the cave and listen, he might discover the very images he needs for his art. Or think of the leader who buries vulnerability to appear strong. His shadow may rise as coldness or cruelty, Yet if he faces it, he may find the capacity for compassion he has long denied. Jung cautioned that ignoring the shadow does not make it vanish. It simply grows in secret, manifesting through projection. We condemn in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. That is why the person who irritates us most often carries the mirror of our disowned traits. The shadow is not out there. It is within. Facing it means reclaiming power we once abandoned. Imagine walking deeper into that surreal forest. Behind you, the mask of the persona has fallen. Before you stretches a tunnel carved of stone, dimly lit by a faint glow. On the walls, your own shadow elongates, twisting into strange forms. You feel unease, but also inevitability. There is no path to wholeness without this descent. Each distorted figure is not a demon, but a fragment of your soul, waiting for recognition. The task is not to defeat the shadow, but to dialogue with it. Jung often encouraged active imagination, speaking with the figures of the unconscious as though they were real. In such encounters, the shadow might rage or accuse, but if we listen, we may hear its truth. It seeks not destruction, but inclusion. To embrace the shadow is to widen the circle of the self, to say, yes, this too belongs to me. Michael, in our story, eventually allows himself to feel anger. At first it terrifies him. His hands tremble, his voice shakes. But he learns that anger need not destroy. It can protect boundaries, ignite passion, fuel courage. What he once rejected becomes part of his strength. This is the gift hidden in the darkness. Not perfection, but completeness. Yet the shadow is not the end. It is a passage. Once we dare to stand in the cave, to look our denied selves in the eye, another mystery awaits. The unconscious does not contain only fear and rage. It also holds images of profound beauty, the archetypes that guide the psyche toward balance. Among these is the figure of the inner opposite, the anima or animus, waiting to be discovered. When the traveler emerges from the darkness of the shadow, another threshold appears. It is not a cave or a mask this time, but a mirror, tall, gleaming, and silent. Jung described this next stage as projection. What we see in others is often a reflection of what lies unacknowledged within ourselves. The mirror does not flatter. It shows the features we deny, the emotions we repress, the truths we cannot yet face. Imagine Sarah, who has always prided herself on being rational and controlled. She despises people who seem emotional, calling them dramatic or unstable. Yet beneath her calm exterior lies grief she has never allowed herself to feel. Whenever she encounters someone in tears, her irritation flares. Jung would say Sarah is gazing into a mirror. Those tears belong to her own unexpressed sorrow. By condemning them in others, she avoids facing them in herself. This mirror of projection is powerful because it externalizes the unconscious. Instead of acknowledging our flaws, we assign them to the world around us. The colleague we call arrogant, the neighbor we call selfish, the friend we call unreliable. Each accusation may point not only outward, but inward. The more fiercely we react, the clearer the reflection. The mirror insists, what you resist outside lives also within you. But the mirror does not only reflect the negative, it also reveals unclaimed greatness. The mentor we admire, the artist whose creativity leaves us breathless, the leader whose courage inspires us, these too are mirrors. They show us qualities we secretly possess, but have not yet embraced. Jung believed that projections, both light and dark, are invitations. They are the psyche's way of saying, this belongs to you. Integrate it. Picture the surreal image. In a vast desert stands a colossal mirror, its surface rippling like water. You step closer, and instead of your familiar face, you see a stranger staring back, a mixture of shadow and light, beauty and distortion. The impulse is to turn away, to deny what is revealed. But individuation asks that you pause, that you study the reflection, that you admit, this too is me. Jung warned that breaking projections is not easy. They cling to others with stubborn intensity. Yet each time we recognize a projection, we reclaim a piece of our own soul. When Sarah finally allowed herself to grieve, she discovered that emotional expression was not weakness, but strength. By facing the tears she saw in others, she found her own capacity for healing. The mirror of projection, then, is both unsettling and liberating. It strips away illusions. It reveals contradictions. It humbles us, but it also expands us, allowing us to claim qualities we once disowned. To step through the mirror is to enter a deeper dialogue with the unconscious, to accept that self-knowledge requires honesty not only with our flaws, but with our hidden brilliance. And yet, beyond the mirror, another mystery waits. For deep within the unconscious lies not only shadow and projection, but the figure of the inner counterpart, the anima or animus, the gendered soul image that calls us toward balance. The traveler, having faced the mirror, now hears faint music in the distance, a dance beginning in the twilight. From the mirror of projection, the traveler moves onward and hears a subtle rhythm, like music rising from the depths. In the twilight of the psyche, two figures appear, one masculine, one feminine. They are not strangers, but inner companions, each carrying the qualities the conscious self has neglected. Jung called them the Anima and the Animus, the soul images of the inner opposite gender. To encounter them is to discover the parts of ourselves that complete us. The anima is the feminine side within a man. Sensitivity, intuition, receptivity, the capacity for relationship. The animus is the masculine side within a woman. Reason, strength, willpower, clarity of direction. Jung did not mean these qualities belong only to one gender, but that society often conditions us to repress half of our potential. Individuation demands that we embrace the neglected side, for only then can wholeness emerge. Consider Mark, a successful engineer. He is logical, precise, always in control. Yet his relationships fail, and he feels distant from his own emotions. Dreams begin to visit him. A mysterious woman guiding him through strange landscapes, sometimes nurturing, sometimes fierce. Jung would recognize her as Mark's anima, the inner feminine reaching toward him, insisting that he listen to his feelings and allow intuition a voice. Or think of Clara, devoted to her family and admired for her empathy. She gives endlessly, but she struggles to assert her own needs. In her dreams, a stern male figure appears, urging her to stand tall, to speak with authority, to claim her own path. This is her animus, calling her to balance compassion with strength. To meet the anima or animus can be unsettling. They may appear in dreams, fantasies, or projections onto others. A man may feel inexplicably drawn to a woman who embodies the anima he has not yet integrated. A woman may idealize a man who mirrors her animus. These encounters are magnetic, but they can also distort relationships if we mistake the inner image for an external person. Jung warned that the task is not to fuse with the projection, but to recognize it, to draw the qualities inward, and to weave them into consciousness. Imagine the archetypal scene. In a vast temple, two colossal statues face each other, one male, one female. Between them burns a circle of light, pulsing with rhythm. A lone traveler stands between, feeling the pull of both. The statues are not adversaries but partners. Their dance is not about dominance, but union. To step into their circle is to accept that within us lives both strength and tenderness, reason and intuition, will and surrender. When Mark finally allowed himself to weep after years of suppression, he felt fragile at first. But soon he realized tears did not weaken him. They made him more human, more able to love. When Clara began to assert her boundaries, she feared rejection. Instead, she found respect, even admiration. Each had welcomed the inner opposite, and in doing so, discovered a greater balance. This union is not a final arrival, but a lifelong dance. The Anima and Animus shift forms, sometimes appearing as guides, sometimes as challengers. They test our willingness to grow. Yet with each step of the dance, we reclaim more of our wholeness. Beyond this stage lies another guide: dreams themselves. For while the Anima and Animus open the door to balance, dreams provide the compass that directs the journey. The traveler, having danced with the inner counterparts, now looks up to see the night sky filled with symbols, moons, stars, and glowing pathways, pointing the way deeper into the self. As the traveler steps beyond the dance of Anima and Animus, the night sky opens above them, vast and alive with symbols. Stars glimmer not as random lights, but as patterns, constellations whispering direction. This is how Jung understood dreams, not meaningless fragments, but a compass for the soul, guiding us through the labyrinth of individuation. Dreams are the language of the unconscious, the bridge between what we know and what lies hidden. They do not speak in logic, but in images, archetypal, strange, often unsettling. A key that will not fit a lock, a staircase leading into water, a familiar face that suddenly transforms. To the rational mind, these seem nonsensical. But to Jung, they were maps, pointing the way to what consciousness has ignored. Consider David, the businessman we met earlier. After his sense of emptiness, his dreams begin to shift. One night, he sees himself walking a spiral staircase down into the earth, where a glowing flame flickers at the center of a cavern. He wakes confused but moved. In Jungian terms, the spiral descent is a symbol of going inward, the flame a sign of the self calling. The dream is not random. It is his psyche offering direction, or imagine Anna, who wore the mask of competence. In her dream, she is carrying a heavy box, refusing help, until at last she stumbles and the box cracks open, revealing delicate birds that soar into the sky. Jung would see this as her unconscious urging her to release control, to allow vulnerability to take flight as freedom. Dreams often exaggerate what the waking self resists. If we deny anger, the dream may show us storms or fire. If we repress desire, figures may appear seductive or overwhelming. If we ignore creativity, the dream may fill with strange inventions or radiant colors. Jung believed that by studying these images, we can hear the voice of the unconscious speaking directly to us. Picture again the archetypal scene. Beneath the night sky, a lone traveler stands on a spiral path, a colossal moon illuminating the way. Symbols float in the air: a key, a mandala, a serpent, a chalice. Each glows faintly, beckoning interpretation. The traveler realizes these are not random signs, but messages, invitations to understand what lies within. Jung developed a method he called amplification. Instead of reducing a dream to a single meaning, he urged us to explore its associations with myths, symbols, and personal experience. The spiral staircase might connect to ancient labyrinths, to initiation rituals, to the universal archetype of descent. By exploring these resonances, the dreamer discovers layers of meaning. But dreams are not only for interpretation, they are for dialogue. Jung often engaged them through active imagination, re-entering the dream in waking life, continuing the conversation with the images. In this way, the unconscious is not a passive mystery, but an active partner, guiding us step by step. The compass of dreams is never static. Each night brings new directions, new symbols, adjusting as we walk. Some dreams warn of imbalance, others encourage hidden potential. To ignore them is to wander blindly. To honor them is to walk with a guide. David, after many dreams of descent, finally chose to leave his corporate role for a time and travel inward. Anna, listening to her dream of the birds, began to practice vulnerability, discovering a freedom she had long denied. Both found that the compass of dreams pointed not outward, but inward, toward authenticity. Thus, on the path of individuation, dreams are not diversions. They are the map itself. They point us toward the conflicts we must face, the qualities we must reclaim, the wholeness waiting to emerge. The traveler gazes at the sky once more. The stars shift, forming two colossal figures locked in opposition. Light and dark, fire and ice, desire and restraint. The next step on the path is clear: to confront not only symbols but the very tension of opposites within. Standing beneath the night sky of dreams, the traveler sees the constellations take form. Two immense figures facing one another, one radiant with light, the other cloaked in shadow. Their clash fills the horizon, and in between them stands the solitary figure of the seeker. This is the next stage Jung described: the confrontation with inner conflict. For the psyche is not a seamless whole. It is a battleground where opposites wrestle. Desire against restraint, freedom against duty, love against fear, courage against doubt. We often experience this as indecision, as inner turmoil, as the nagging sense of being pulled in two directions at once. Yet Jung believed these conflicts are not accidents. They are the crucible of transformation. Only by holding the tension of opposites can something new emerge. Consider Mark, the engineer who encountered his anima. Even as he embraced his sensitivity, another part of him resisted, insisting he remain purely logical. His days became a battlefield, reason pulling one way, emotion pulling another. He felt fractured, unstable. Jung would assure him this is the very place where individuation deepens. The psyche demands that we stop choosing sides and instead learn to contain both. Or think of Clara, who awakened her animus and began to assert her boundaries. Immediately, guilt surged within her. Was she abandoning compassion, betraying her role as caregiver? The struggle was sharp, almost unbearable. But Jung taught that such tension is the price of growth. By staying with the conflict, rather than collapsing into one pole, Clara could discover a new form of strength, firmness infused with care. The image is archetypal, a traveler standing between two colossal statues, one bathed in golden light, the other draped in shadow. Lightning cracks the sky, illuminating both. The impulse is to flee, to escape the strain. But individuation requires that the traveler remain, that they breathe into the tension, that they refuse to settle for half of themselves. Jung used the phrase, the transcendent function, to describe what happens here. When the psyche endures the pressure of opposing forces without forcing premature resolution, something unexpected arises. A third way, a synthesis, a new symbol that transcends the contradiction. This is not compromise, but creation. Out of conflict, Wholeness is born. Michael, the gentle man who confronted his shadow, once struggled with anger. He feared it would destroy his kindness. But when he allowed both forces to exist, his gentleness and his rage, he found they could combine into assertiveness. Anger gave his kindness backbone. Kindness softened his anger. The tension produced a new strength he had never known. The danger, of course, is that many of us collapse the tension too soon. We cling to one side and repress the other, or we swing back and forth, unable to integrate. The task Jung set before us is harder: to remain in the crucible until the heat forges something new. It is like holding two hands of fire, refusing to drop either until they merge into light. Perhaps you feel such conflict within yourself. Perhaps a part of you longs for freedom, while another part clings to safety. Perhaps you yearn for intimacy, yet fear vulnerability. These are not signs of weakness. They are invitations. To confront inner conflict is to stand at the very forge of transformation. The traveler remains between the statues as the storm rages. Slowly, the lightning reveals symbols etched into the stone. A serpent coiled on one side, a dove spreading wings on the other. In the tension between them, a new symbol begins to glow, a circle radiant and whole. This is the promise of the transcendent function. From conflict, integration, and beyond this forge, another horizon opens. For the psyche does not only confront conflict, it also offers symbols to guide the way. Archetypes emerge as signposts on the path, shaping dreams, myths, and visions. The traveler, weary but steadied by the storm, now approaches the carved gateways of these ancient symbols. The next chapter of individuation. The storm subsides, and in its wake, the traveler finds themselves standing before towering monoliths carved with symbols. Some are familiar, others strange, but all radiate an undeniable presence. Jung called these archetypes primordial patterns that live in the collective unconscious, shaping dreams, myths, and the stories of every culture. To encounter them is to realize that the psyche is not a private chamber, but a vast cathedral built across ages. Archetypes emerge in every human life. They are the universal figures we meet again and again. The mother, the wise old man, the hero, the trickster, the child. They appear in dreams as vivid images, in myths as recurring characters, in our daily struggles as inner voices. To see them is to recognize that the journey of individuation is not only personal, but shared across humanity. We are walking paths carved long before us. Consider Clara, who wrestled with guilt as she learned to assert herself. In her dreams, an old man appeared, guiding her through a labyrinth, offering riddles rather than answers. Jung would call this figure the wise old man archetype, a symbol of inner wisdom arising when the conscious mind falters. Clara realized the riddles pointed her back to her own intuition, reminding her she was not weak for seeking guidance, but strong for listening within. Or think of David, whose emptiness led him onto the path. He dreamed of a child leading him through a crumbling city to a hidden garden. This was no ordinary child. It was the archetypal divine child, representing renewal, innocence, and the potential for rebirth. By following the child, David recognized that his journey was not about regaining past triumphs, but about birthing a new way of being. The trickster archetype also appears, often when we are too rigid, too certain. Michael once dreamed of a jester who disrupted a solemn ritual, mocking him until he laughed despite himself. At first, he dismissed it as nonsense, but Jung would say the trickster brings disruption precisely to break ego's grip. The laughter was a medicine, loosening Michael's perfectionism. Archetypes are not merely personal guides. They are the building blocks of myth and religion. They shape the stories of heroes across cultures: Odysseus, Buddha, Christ, Gilgamesh. They rise in modern films, in novels, even in the roles we unconsciously assign to those around us. When we dream of the wise mother, we join countless generations who have sought her nurturing presence. When we face the shadow figure in a nightmare, we are standing in the same darkness that mythic heroes faced in underworlds. Picture the archetypal scene: colossal stone walls stretching upward, carved with faces, animals, spirals, and mandalas. Each symbol glows faintly, as though alive. The traveler walks among them, feeling both awe and recognition. For though the carvings are ancient, they speak directly to the present moment. This is the power of archetypes. They bridge the timeless and the personal. Jung insisted that archetypes cannot be fully understood by intellect alone. They must be experienced. A dream of the mother may awaken feelings of safety or suffocation, depending on our history. A vision of the hero may inspire courage or expose arrogance. Each archetype carries a polarity, both light and shadow. Integration means embracing both. As we engage with these symbols, we realize they are not foreign invaders, but native citizens of the psyche. They remind us that our personal story is woven into a larger tapestry. Individuation is not solitary. It is the rediscovery of our place in the human myth. And yet, the traveler senses that archetypes are not the final destination. They are milestones, yes, but they point towards something greater: the transformation of the ego itself. The walls begin to tremble, the symbols shifting and reassembling. A spiral staircase rises, leading upward toward a radiant glow. The next step is clear. The ego must undergo its own transformation, breaking apart and surrendering to the balance of the self. The traveler ascends the spiral staircase, rising out of the archetypal hall, each step echoing with a strange resonance. The walls shimmer with the symbols of the psyche, yet as the ascent continues, cracks begin to appear. Stone fragments split away, suspended in the air, as if the very architecture of the self is breaking apart. Jung described this stage as the transformation of the ego, the shift from being master and tyrant to becoming servant and partner of the larger self. The ego is essential. Without it, we could not navigate daily life. It allows us to make choices, to maintain boundaries, to say "I" in the chorus of humanity. But the ego is also prone to inflation, believing itself to be the center of the universe. Individuation requires the ego to bow, to surrender its illusion of control and accept its place within a greater whole. Consider David once more. Having followed his dreams into hidden gardens, he clung still to his identity as achiever. Even on his inward path, he wanted to achieve individuation as though it were another trophy. Yet life had other plans. His carefully managed career collapsed in an economic downturn. At first he felt destroyed, humiliated, but Jung would call this collapse a necessary breaking. Only when the ego's fortress crumbles can the deeper self step forward. Or think of Anna, who had worn the mask of competence. When she finally let her vulnerability breathe, she felt exposed and frightened. She wanted quickly to rebuild her persona, to prove she was still strong. But repeated failures in relationships forced her to see that her old strategies no longer worked. Each crack in the mask was painful, but it allowed her to glimpse a larger truth. Strength is not the absence of weakness, but the integration of it. The archetypal image is striking. A colossal stone statue of a human face, once solid, now splitting with radiant cracks of golden light. Pieces break away, floating upward into the night sky. Beneath the fragments stands the traveler, humbled, awed, yet strangely relieved. The destruction is not annihilation, but revelation. The light was always within, waiting for the ego's shell to split. Jung compared this to the alchemical process of death and rebirth. The ego must undergo nigredo, the dark night of dissolution, so that new life may emerge. This is not the destruction of the self, but its transformation. The ego shifts from commander to companion, learning to serve the self rather than pretending to be the self. Michael, who once feared anger, experienced this too. When he allowed his shadow into awareness, his ego resisted, terrified of losing control. But slowly he learned that control was never the point. Integration was. His ego did not vanish, but it softened, became more flexible, more willing to listen to the unconscious. This transformation is rarely comfortable. It feels like failure, like collapse. Yet Jung taught that only through this surrender can wholeness grow. The ego, once so proud, becomes like soil broken open to receive the seed of the self. The traveler climbs higher, the staircase cracking beneath their feet. Still they ascend, drawn by the glow above. At last, the stairs end in a vast chamber. At its center hovers a radiant orb, glowing with colors of gold and white, pulsing like a living heart. This is the next stage, the encounter with the self, the center toward which all paths converge. At the summit of the broken staircase, the traveler steps into a vast chamber carved out of silence itself. Darkness stretches endlessly, yet in the center shines a radiant sphere, glowing like a living sun suspended within shadow. The air vibrates with stillness, as if the entire journey has been leading to this moment. Jung called this the encounter with the self, the deepest and most mysterious archetype, the radiant center of the psyche, the wholeness toward which individuation strives. The self is not the ego. The ego says, "I am this body, this role, this story." The self says, "I am all that you are, and more besides." It is the totality of consciousness and unconsciousness, the source of inner wisdom, the image of God within the human soul. To approach the self is to feel both awe and terror, for its immensity dwarfs the small island of the ego. Yet it is also to feel peace, for we sense at last that we are part of something infinite. Imagine Anna, who had struggled with her persona and shadow. One night she dreams of standing before a mandala of light, its patterns spinning endlessly yet never repeating. She wakes trembling, tears in her eyes. Jung would say the mandala is an image of the self, appearing spontaneously to show her that wholeness is possible. She is not only her competence or her vulnerability, her mask or her fears, she is all of them, harmonized in a greater circle. David too finds himself humbled. In a dream, he kneels before a jewel radiating golden light. He reaches for it, but the jewel dissolves into his chest, flooding him with warmth. He wakes knowing the treasure was never outside. It was within him all along. The self is not distant. It lives at the core of our being, waiting for recognition. Jung often spoke of this encounter in religious language, though he insisted it was psychological as well as spiritual. The self is the imago Dei, the image of divinity within. To meet it is to feel connected to the sacred, whether or not one believes in a deity. Mystics across traditions have described similar experiences. The Buddhists' enlightenment, the Christians' union with God, the Sufis' dissolution in the beloved. For Jung, these were all expressions of the psyche touching its deepest center. The image is archetypal, a lone traveler standing before a colossal orb of light, the ground glowing beneath their feet. Shadows that once haunted them dissolve into radiance. The mask of persona, the darkness of shadow, the duality of anima and animus, the conflicts of the ego, all swirl together into a greater pattern. The self embraces them all, yet Jung warned that encountering the self is not the end of the journey, but a turning point. To behold the self is to glimpse wholeness, but that wholeness must be lived, integrated, embodied in daily life. The danger is inflation. The ego mistaking itself for the self, claiming divine status. This leads not to wholeness, but madness. The true task is humility, to bow before the self and allow its light to guide the ongoing path. Michael, after years of struggle, dreamed of a glowing circle within which his anger and kindness embraced one another. He awoke knowing the self had revealed the unity he had sought. But he did not proclaim himself enlightened. Instead, he quietly began to live differently, listening more deeply, speaking more truthfully, forgiving more freely. The self had entered his life not as a crown, but as a compass. The traveler stands before the radiant orb. They feel its warmth enter their chest, its light dissolve their divisions. For a moment, they are whole. And yet, the orb whispers, "Do not remain here. Carry this wholeness into the world. Heal, integrate, live." With reverence, the traveler turns from the chamber. Behind them glows the self, eternal and unshaken. Before them lies a new path, one not of visions and symbols alone, but of daily life, where the task is to weave the sacred into the ordinary. The next stage is clear: integration and healing, where opposites merge into harmony and the psyche learns to live in balance. The traveler descends from the chamber of light, carrying within them the memory of the self like a flame cupped in gentle hands. The world looks different now. The same forest where shadows once terrified now breathes with quiet beauty. The same figures of conflict that once towered as enemies now stand as teachers. Yet the vision of wholeness cannot remain only as an inner revelation. It must be integrated into the fabric of daily life. This is the stage of healing, where light and shadow, masculine and feminine, ego and self, learn to dwell together. Integration does not mean perfection. Jung warned against imagining wholeness as purity or flawlessness. Rather, it is the reconciliation of opposites, the weaving together of fragments into a tapestry where nothing is excluded. The shadow remains, but no longer rules from the dark. The persona remains, but no longer hides the soul. The ego remains, but no longer commands as tyrant. Each part finds its rightful place, like instruments in an orchestra tuning to the same key. Consider Clara, who struggled to balance compassion with strength. After her encounter with the wise old man archetype, she began to practice listening to her inner guidance. At first, her old guilt still rose when she set boundaries, but over time she discovered that her compassion grew stronger when paired with firmness. She could say no without abandoning love. This was integration, not erasing either pole, but allowing both to work in harmony. Or think of David, who once chased success to fill his emptiness. Having glimpsed the self in his dream, he did not abandon the world. Instead, he began to engage with it differently. Work was no longer about conquest, but contribution. He started mentoring others, finding joy in sharing wisdom rather than hoarding accolades. Healing meant not rejecting his ambition, but transforming it into service. Integration often feels like returning home after a long exile. The neglected parts of ourselves, anger, grief, longing, tenderness, step forward timidly, as if asking, "Am I allowed here?" When we answer yes, the psyche breathes easier. Symptoms that once plagued us, anxiety, compulsions, restless dissatisfaction, soften, for the inner war is no longer raging. The archetypal image is striking. An ancient tree with sprawling roots, its trunk scarred yet strong. At its base sits the traveler, meditating. The roots curl around them like arms, while a circle of golden light expands outward, blending shadow and radiance into one field. This is the symbol of integration, rooted in earth, open to sky, alive with balance. Yet healing is not a one-time event. It is a rhythm, a practice. Old wounds resurface, old habits return, but now they are met with awareness rather than denial. Integration means welcoming the returning shadow with compassion, listening again to dreams, honoring the self's presence in ordinary choices. It is living in dialogue with the unconscious rather than in opposition to it. Michael, once haunted by his suppressed anger, now uses that same fire to protect what he loves. He no longer fears conflict, but neither does he revel in it. His anger, once exiled, now serves his kindness. Anna, who feared vulnerability, now shares her struggles openly with trusted companions, discovering that authenticity draws people closer rather than pushing them away. Each step of integration ripples outward, healing not only the individual but also their relationships. This is the gift Jung saw in Individuation, that when one person integrates, the whole community benefits. A healed psyche radiates balance, becoming a source of stability and inspiration. Jung believed the fate of humanity itself depends on such inner work. For a world at war with itself mirrors the inner wars of unintegrated souls. Healing inside is healing outside. The traveler rises from the roots of the ancient tree. Their heart carries the circle of light. Their steps echo harmony. Yet the journey is not done. Integration must become embodiment, lived authentically in every breath. The next horizon calls to live one's truth in the world without masks, without pretense, with the courage of wholeness. The path now opens into a wide horizon. The forest thins, the walls of stone fall away, and the traveler steps into an open plain bathed in golden light. This is the stage Jung described as living authentically, when the fruits of individuation are carried into the everyday world. It is one thing to encounter the self in vision or dream, another to embody its guidance in the midst of ordinary life. The challenge now is not only to know who we are, but to live it fully. Living authentically means no longer being enslaved by masks. The persona is still there, but now it serves rather than dominates. We wear it consciously, like a garment chosen for a specific purpose, and we remove it when it no longer fits. Authenticity is the willingness to let others see us as we are. Not perfect, not finished, but whole in process. Consider Anna, who once clung to competence as her identity. After her journey through shadow and self, she begins to lead differently at work. Instead of projecting invulnerability, she admits when she does not know an answer. At first, she fears judgment. Yet her colleagues respond with respect, finding her honesty refreshing. Her authenticity creates a culture where others, too, can be real. David, who once pursued success to mask emptiness, now approaches his career with clarity. He chooses projects that align with his values, even if they bring less recognition. He finds meaning in mentoring younger colleagues, in listening deeply to their struggles. His life is no longer about climbing ladders, but about walking paths that resonate with his soul. Living authentically does not guarantee ease. In fact, it often provokes resistance. Friends and family may not understand when we shed old roles. Society may prefer the comfort of our mask. But individuation demands courage. The courage to walk the road, even if it diverges from the expectations of others. Jung believed this is the true heroism. Not slaying dragons outside, but remaining faithful to the self within. The archetypal image is luminous. A lone traveler walking across a barren plain toward a distant city glowing with golden light. The path glimmers beneath their feet, illuminated by the sun breaking through clouds. They carry no disguise, no armor, only the presence of wholeness. Each step is authentic, and the horizon welcomes them with radiance. Living authentically also means embracing limits. We no longer pretend to be everything for everyone. We honor what we can give and what we cannot. We say yes when it is true and no when it is necessary. We let relationships reshape around honesty, even if some fall away. For authenticity does not mean pleasing the world. It means aligning with the soul. Michael, once terrified of anger, now speaks up when boundaries are crossed. Not with cruelty, but with clarity. To his surprise, his relationships grow healthier, for others trust those who live in truth. Clara, balancing compassion and strength, begins to teach her children not by hiding her struggles, but by modeling courage. She shows them that authenticity is not perfection, but integrity. Jung insisted that individuation is not withdrawal from life, but deeper engagement with it. The individuated person does not escape the world. They serve it, but from a place of authenticity. They bring balance where there was division, clarity where there was confusion. In this way, individuation is not selfish. It is a gift to the collective. The traveler continues across the plain, each step steady. The city of light draws near, shimmering with promise. Yet as they approach, they realize the journey is not about arriving somewhere new, but about embodying what they have become. For the final stage is not merely to live authentically, but to triumph as the inner hero, one who has faced masks, shadows, conflicts, and the self, and who now stands whole. At last, the traveler reaches the summit of the inner journey. The horizon opens wide, and before them rises a mountain crowned with light. Each step upward recalls the struggles they have faced, the heavy mask of the persona, the descent into the shadow, the mirror of projections, the dance of Anima and Animus, the storms of inner conflict, the symbols carved into stone, the cracking of the ego, the radiant encounter with the self, the rooted calm of integration, and the steady walk of authenticity. All of it has led here. The triumph of the inner hero. Jung believed every life is structured like a hero's quest. Myths from every culture tell the same story in different forms. The hero leaves the familiar world, confronts trials, descends into darkness, gains treasure, and returns transformed. Individuation is this myth lived inwardly. The treasure is not gold or power, but the discovery of wholeness. The battle is not with outer monsters, but with the divisions within ourselves. And the return is not to a throne, but to daily life infused with meaning. Picture the traveler now, standing on the mountain peak, arms outstretched as dawn breaks. Above them, the sky blooms with radiant patterns, a mandala of light encircling the heavens. This is not conquest in the usual sense. It is surrender, union, fulfillment. The hero has triumphed not by erasing their flaws, but by embracing them, not by conquering others, but by reconciling the inner kingdom. Anna feels this triumph when she can stand before her peers without hiding behind perfection. Her openness is no longer a wound, but a source of strength. David feels it when he mentors others, sensing that the emptiness once haunting him has been filled by purpose. Michael feels it when his anger and kindness flow together as assertive compassion. Clara feels it when she teaches her children through authenticity, no longer bound by guilt but guided by balance. Each of them has become the inner hero of their own story. Jung emphasized that this triumph is never absolute. Individuation is not a final destination, but a lifelong process. The hero may stand on the mountain today, only to face new valleys tomorrow. Yet once we have glimpsed the view from the summit, we can never return unchanged. We know the self exists. We know wholeness is possible, and this knowledge carries us through every new descent. The archetypal image is luminous, the traveler silhouetted against a radiant sky, a circle of light expanding outward like ripples across creation. Their figure is small, yet their presence feels immense, for they embody the truth that to heal oneself is to heal the world. The triumph is not private. It radiates, touching families, communities, even nations. This is why Jung believed individuation matters not only for the individual, but for humanity itself. A world filled with unintegrated shadows will tear itself apart. But a world shaped by individuated souls, men and women who have faced their masks, owned their darkness, embraced their inner opposites, and lived authentically. Such a world can move toward peace, and so the traveler stands on the summit, not as a conqueror, but as a beacon. The journey has revealed that the greatest heroism is not to dominate, but to integrate. Not to escape the human condition, but to embrace it fully. The light rises higher, mandala expanding, mountain glowing. The traveler smiles, for they know the truth Jung devoted his life to teaching, that the ultimate quest of every soul is not outward victory, but inward wholeness. This is the triumph of the inner hero. Individuation is not a prize at the end of life, nor a status to be claimed. It is the ongoing work of becoming whole, a process that stretches across decades and never truly ends. Jung described it as a spiral, not a straight line. We revisit our masks, our shadows, our inner conflicts again and again, each time at a deeper level. Yet with every cycle, we draw closer to the radiant center, the self. To walk this path is to accept paradox. We are both light and shadow, both masculine and feminine, both fragile ego and vast self. The task is not to choose one over the other, but to let all belong. This is why individuation is often misunderstood. It is not about self-improvement in the superficial sense. It is not about polishing the ego or chasing spiritual highs. It is about honesty, courage, and humility. The willingness to face what we most fear within ourselves and to love what we find there. The gift of individuation is authenticity. When we cease pretending, when we wear the mask only when needed but do not confuse it with who we are, we begin to live truthfully. Our relationships deepen, for we no longer project so heavily onto others. Our creativity expands, for the energies once trapped in repression are freed. Our sense of meaning grows, for we feel connected not only to our own soul, but to the great patterns of humanity and the cosmos. This is why Jung insisted that individuation is not selfish. On the contrary, it is the greatest service we can offer. A person who has reconciled with their shadow is less likely to project hatred onto others. A person who has embraced both their masculine and feminine sides can bring balance to their communities. A person who lives authentically inspires others to do the same. Healing the individual psyche becomes a ripple of healing for the collective. If you have listened this far, perhaps you too feel the whisper of the self within. Perhaps you have sensed the call during sleepless nights, or in the emptiness after a long pursuit, or in the mirror of someone who irritated or inspired you. Jung would say, "Do not ignore this call. It is your soul inviting you to the greatest adventure of all." Individuation is the hero's journey, written not in myth, but in your own life. You may not fight dragons, but you will face your fears. You may not discover buried treasure, but you will uncover the richness of your soul. You may not wear a crown, but you will embody authenticity, and in doing so, you will shine a quiet light for others. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." May this story remind you that the path is open, the journey is waiting, and the self is calling. And if you hear that whisper within, know that you are not alone. For every soul is invited to this quest, and all of humanity shares in its triumph.